Week 2 of OutKick 360. We are back alongside Chad Withrow and Paul Kuharski. I'm Jonathan Hutton across the OutKick OTT network. Glad you're with us. Monday edition is here. The madness was crazy. We're going to react to it all this first hour. The Tennessee Power Hour coming up at noon Central and 1 o'clock Eastern. Guys, how about that first round?
Incredible weekend. We don't want to do the recency bias thing where we say everything is the greatest or everything is the worst. But that was pretty close to the best weekend of college basketball we've ever seen. Every seed line, except for 16, won a first-round game, 1 through 15, and then even more madness in the second round. It was a lot of fun this weekend.
Seeds mean nothing. We talked about this last week. It's very weird to have a bracket with Sweet 16 established on one side and not on the other side on a Monday. A day full of hopefully some more good games today, and we see what happens to a team like Ohio after a great first round win over Virginia. Today, we'll see if I could do a little bit better on the betting front where I had an awful start. I blame all on Baylor, who won by 24 instead of 25, costing me my parlay that I spelled out on Friday and setting things awry. But some wonderful games to watch, and we've got a lot of observations on a bunch of them and some trends.
OutKick 360, we were able to meet quite a few of you this past Friday at the OutKick VIP watch party. Huge thanks to all of you who showed up and packed the place at 6th and Peabody. It was a blast. Huge thanks to Lance Lee and Jacob Swanson for making the show happen for us today. David Reed is the chairman of the board. You can react with us on social media. At OutKick 360 is where you can react on Twitter. You can find us by searching us out on Facebook. And if you're watching on YouTube, we please ask that you hit that subscribe button. You hit the thumbs up. You give us a rating on the Apple Podcasts as well. Wherever you find us, thanks for tuning in today. Iowa and Oregon will tip off today in the second round, as we get set for the Sweet 16. Oregon, the 7th seed, we haven't seen the play yet because of VCU and the no contest in the first round. So Oregon tips off their tournament action against the second-seeded Iowa Hawkeyes. That's coming up at 11:10 Central, 12:10 Eastern. And then we get to the afternoon slate, which includes Gonzaga and Oklahoma, UCLA and Abilene Christian, Creighton and Ohio, Michigan, LSU, and much more. We'll be previewing those matchups, and I'll give you our perfect parlay for OutKick 360 on this Monday edition. If not for Winthrop, I would have gone 3 for 3, and I had the parlay locked in on Friday. It went all the way to the final tip-off, and then Winthrop did not live up to expectations.
So I nailed the parlay, mine on Friday that I laid out
1
there.
1 for 3.
Nailed it. Decided to dive back into it on Saturday and lost every bet. So that's really the balancing act of doing this thing. So you put yourself out there one day, it's successful. The next day, not so much. So bad day on Saturday. It is fun, though, and you were saying, Hutton, it's confusing about what round are we in when there's games on a Monday. It reminds me of that U.S. Open playoff 18 holes between Tiger Woods and Rocco Mediate, which was on a Monday. Remember how strange that was when they came back and played on a Monday where Tiger was hurting? And I kind of feel the same way about you've got college basketball games preempting soap operas today on CBS with 11 a.m. tip-off and then playing throughout the day. One other slight rant I want to go on. Do a better job with the TV schedule on Sunday and Saturday. I don't understand why they space out the games so much during the day and then clump a bunch of games together at night.
I understand.
Like you could stagger it throughout the day. I know they want the CBS audience.
Did your daughter
have
a softball practice yesterday afternoon?
But I'm telling you, Sunday so CBS goes away from it, right? Sunday night CBS, they go to 60 minutes, then they go to the Equalizer or whatever's on after that, and they go into their Sunday night programming. So sports on a Sunday afternoon is sacred ground on networks. That's why the CBS golf tournament every week gets good ratings for that reason. They're going to cable anyway at night. So just put one of those games. Are you robbing from something on TNT? Are you robbing a Fast and the Furious sequel that's going to air on TNT on a Sunday night, the ratings from that? Or in the afternoon? Like, why not put games on cable during the afternoon where you can stagger them, where you're not just bunching a bunch of games together? I don't get it.
I think they're really working to maximize later in the day. They give you options later in the day. Get them out of the afternoon because they know on a spring afternoon, people are out doing stuff. I was at a couple soccer games and a baseball practice, and sure enough, I was home when more was going on TV, so I actually kind of liked it.
What are people doing on a Monday afternoon?
Well, Monday afternoon, they shouldn't have
They
a
got
lot
games on a Monday afternoon.
Yeah, but are they
Usually
stacked
games on a
differently
Thursday
than
and
they were
Friday.
stacked
My
yesterday?
point being, they make decisions not just based on TV ratings, but based on always having a lot of action. When you've got a bunch of games going
Top
on,
to bottom.
you space it out to where one game starts and 15, 20 minutes later, 30 minutes later, another game starts. And then you have windows where 3 games are happening at once. That should happen throughout the day on a weekend and not just late at night when you have 2 or 3
But
games happening
today
at
it'll be
once.
thicker scheduling at night than it is during the day, and that's beneficial to all of us, right?
I don't think so. I mean,
That's the way it was yesterday. There was one game,
and I'm saying
then
that's
the
not
Wisconsin
beneficial
game
because
was on.
I'm at home on Sunday in the afternoon. A lot of people are. And then I just don't. Here's my point. If you're going to do it, there's a way to do it where you've got 2 games happening at once and there's a little bit of bleed over into both.
Yeah.
Do that throughout the day. I don't know why there's a 15-minute delay from one tip-off, a game ends, to the next, where nothing's happening at, 1:30 on a Sunday afternoon?
Yeah,
And then there's 3 things happening at 6:30 on Sunday night or 8:30 on Sunday night. I don't get it.
Tournament takeaways, the madness is back, and it is glorious. But on top of that, my number one headline from round 1 and round 2 is Loyola Chicago caught me off guard again.
really good.
You know, fooled me once, but it happened again. Fooled me twice, shame on me. And here they are with Cameron Krutwig, 19 points. Sister Jean can't stay off the screen, and I still am all here for it. Like it was great. They provide the perfect college basketball tournament drama. Because in a way, Chad, they are a lot like Belmont in that regard for me, where you want to root for the not just the underdog, the ultimate underdog, college size. You've got them versus Illinois. And the bigger dog who's the number 1 seed, and you're thinking to yourself, okay, let's jump on board. How far can they go? They look like a legitimate Final Four contender.
How do we
after
think
the
that
first
game
weekend.
rated in Chicago yesterday, by the way?
Well, so here's my take on all this, or just the idea I had watching this game. I'm the same way. I mean, I had them winning the first round game and then losing in the second round to Illinois, but shouldn't surprise anyone. I mean, they handled Illinois. That was no fluke. They dominated that game really start to finish and controlled it. Amazing to watch a team like that plays to their roles so well, like Loyola Chicago. I mean, they're incredible at knowing who they are, how to run their offense, great half-court defensive team. But I'm watching that and I'm thinking, if Gonzaga could become the West Coast power over the course of 20 years, right? It took a while. But if Gonzaga can take out UCLA and Arizona and become the West Coast power that gets 5-star prospects to go to Spokane, Washington to play at a small Jesuit Catholic school, why can't Loyola Chicago be that in the Midwest?
It's a legitimate, fair question.
How
The
many
coach
times
is
does it need to
terrific.
happen before we say they're going to go to the Final Four again this year, possibly? Or I definitely think the Elite Eight at this point.
They've already knocked off one of the powers.
They've got 12-seed Oregon State, who's red hot. They dominated Tennessee and Oklahoma State, so not a pushover. But if they beat Oregon State, they're back in the Elite Eight. They're going to have a great shot at getting to another Final Four. And I started to think about it, and it's not inconceivable to think that Porter Moser, whose name's it's already up for the Indiana job, and a lot of Indiana fans wanting them to pay him whatever it takes to bring him over there. But I'm looking at college basketball the way it is now, and I'm thinking of that market and how great it is in high school basketball.
Not a football school.
If you could take a Jesuit school in Spokane and turn them into a national power, that they are now the odds-on favorite to win a national title, why not a Catholic school in Chicago, maybe the greatest city in America for high school basketball, and turn that, I don't care what conference they're in, turn that into a program that is a marquee Sunday afternoon CBS when Michigan and Ohio State scheduled them in the non-conference in November and December. That game is on national TV every time. It's possible. And I watch this team play, and I watch the way their system works, how in tune they are to their roles on that team, and I think we could be watching the next Gonzaga.
He could be Mark Few, and it's worth paying him because the advertising for that school, applications and enrollees spiked last time they had their run, and it's going to happen again now. This week is a massive advertising week for that school, right? Mm-hmm. TV cameras coming to campus, interviews coming to campus, hype for going into the Sweet 16. I think exactly what you're saying is true. Regionally, they don't have as much elbow room, right? There's not as much space around them as there is around the Zags. But otherwise, there's absolutely no reason why not. My favorite moment of what we saw this weekend, it's ridiculous to me to think that I could be so excited by a couple of free throws. But Abilene Christian, as Joe Pleasant stepped to the line, a 58.8% free throw shooter. Broadcasters are saying, he's at the line early. It's a stoppage of play. Bad free throw shooter, Hutton, stepping to the line early. It's a recipe
59%.
Recipe for disaster. Don't go to the line early. Be strolling around. You stand there and you create all this pressure. Ice in his veins, hits 2 free throws, no question, no rim, no bouncing around, nothing. Abilene Christian with the upset, I mean, they were terrific. And, that's one of those upsets, not a buzzer beater, but with steely play throughout, and they were not in any sense of panic whatsoever, just smooth, confident. It's a thrilling one of those.
Joe Pleasant
wins.
and his. It's so funny because we'll sometimes tease fans that are watching a football team run out and say, "Boy, our team's ready today." I can tell in their body language they're ready to go. They're fired up. You could tell Joe Pleasant was going to hit those free throws based on the way he was staring at that rim, and there was no shake to him at all. There was no nervous energy. I mean, you could tell he knew the moment and how big it was, but the way he stood there with his hands on his hips, just staring at that rim, taking a deep breath, and then knocking down those 2 shots, you're not going to find a more pressure-packed situation than that. I will say the pressure is usually on the better team, the higher seed in that moment. So maybe it's less pressure when you're playing with house money and you're Abilene Christian. Still a ton of pressure for him to step up and knock it down. And now Shaka Smart.
Shaka Smart finally gets into a position as a 3 seed to deliver on the promise of his hiring, and he's on the sidelines, hands in his funky hair.
6 years. 6 years, 0 NCAA tournament wins. And he was supposed to be the savior to replace Rick Barnes. Be careful what you wish for. With coaches that are successful, Rick Barnes, we'll talk about it more in our Tennessee Power
we all
Hour.
would have taken
not
Shaka
a success
Smart
in the
for
NCAA
any-
tournament. Clearly, he's got his problems in the NCAA tournament. He's also won 3 more NCAA tournament games than the guy that was picked to replace him in Shaka Smart. And if I would have told you this 6 years ago, that Rick Barnes at Tennessee taking over for Donnie Tyndall, forced out because of NCAA issues, would be more successful and win more NCAA tournament games, a guy with the reputation for being bad in March, than Shaka Smart, a dude who took VCU to the Final Four as an 11 seed, everyone would think that you were crazy.
I'm not saying about Rick Barnes or not about Rick Barnes, but we all would have hired Shaka Smart for a big-time program in a second.
It was a great hire for Texas.
He's the hottest guy out there.
Yep.
And I don't think he's a bad basketball coach. I don't know what's unfolded or why it's gone so badly at Texas. But a 3 seed in the tournament, 3s and 2s are dropping. It's crazy.
Well,
seeds don't mean
what's happened,
anything.
though, 2 of his 3 losses, one was on a half-court bank shot at the buzzer 3 that beat him, and one was with 2 free throws with 1.2 seconds left that beat him. That's what we love about March. It's what we love about this tournament. But if you're Shaka Smart in Texas or a Longhorns fan, that's what you absolutely hate and despise about this tournament.
It is still, at least it appears, one team's tournament to win. And we'll discuss the Zags, who play later this afternoon. We'll give you the very latest there, all the matchups throughout the day, and our perfect parlay from FanDuel.com. It's all coming up on OutKick 360. It is OutKick 360 across the OutKick OTT network and Fox Sports Knoxville. Huge thanks to 1340 and 105.7 WKGN for joining us across the OutKick coverage. And you always remember your first.
That's right. I know that's
First
true
affiliate.
for the three of us. Right?
So I've got a tournament complaint, and
Okay.
I love the basketball this weekend. But moving a three-pointer back hasn't solved the problem that everything's a three or a bunny. There's no mid-range game. That's gone for good. I can live with that because the basketball is still very exciting. But I saw so many missed close shots, some at crucial moments, right? Texas Tech, Kyler Edwards had a clear shot to the basket at the end of the game that would have, I believe, tied it. Missed it horribly, like me driving to the basket, like a layup that he bounced off the
No
backboard.
shot. He had
Terrible.
no shot at it.
Terrible.
Didn't give the ball a chance.
There
to
was
bounce
another
in.
game, I'm sorry, I'm not remembering. A guy had a great chance and went soft instead of going strong to the rim, kind of did a fall away layup. Missed it. These opportunities, like not only is it now a three or a shot near the rim, but the shots near the rim are not as consistently good as they should be. If you're getting the shot near the rim in lieu of kicking it out for the three, those should be made at a very, very high rate. And I saw some crucial situations where these shots, which should be gimmies, bunnies, are not being made. So now we've lost the mid-range jumper. I'm okay with that. I've given that up. Are we losing the ability to hit the close thing because we're practicing the three so much? Are we not going strong to the rim? What's going on in there? I was disappointed by that. And again, marveling, this is enthralling sporting stuff. I'm totally in. But we're missing these shots that are inside the semicircle.
It's funny because I feel like they're better mid-range shooters now across college basketball. I see a lot more guys pump fake, two dribble, pull up, 17 feet,
Yeah.
16 feet that can hit that shot.
And you're allowed to take
But
it.
every time they take it, I think it's a bad shot. Or I like it if I'm the defense. If you're watching a game and you see a guy take a 17-footer, you're immediately thinking, oh, okay, that's
some
a
risk
good shot for
involved
the
and it's
defense.
not
You're
a
willing to
good
put up with
return.
that, right? If that's the shot. But yet, guys are better about hitting it. But, I mean, you look at just the analytics of it, and it makes a lot more sense to take a three or drive it to the basket. Even the Abilene Christian game was a bad, ill-fated layup attempt that led to a putback opportunity and a foul,
Yes.
where Joe Pleasant hit the two free throws. I'm with you on that, Paul. I thought the overall level of play was good. But when it was bad, it was really bad. I mean, there were some teams that just no-showed. Georgetown, North Carolina, Tennessee, that could not do anything offensively. And when you got into a game like that, Oklahoma State last night, another
Really
one.
disappointing.
You just get into a game like that where you see that your offense is stuck. And the flip side of it was, while there were some very good games and big upsets, you saw some teams that were better than what they showed in the tournament that were terrible in their one game in the tournament.
Georgetown was used up, I felt like, and you knew they were either going to carry it on or be done. It was very evident very quickly. They had used it up.
Would you guys take Gonzaga or the field right now, based on what we've seen?
I'm always going to take the field just on percentages, but the Zags are really good.
So last week at this time, I was thinking this is a top seed tournament. That is not the case right out of the gate for this
the
tournament.
top
It
seed
is
tournament,
the
baby.
NCAA tournament for a reason, the March Madness. But the Zags are by far and away the top team in the country. No matter who they're playing, they're posting 80-plus points. And this past week was no different as they took on Norfolk State. Now they've got, later today, Oklahoma in a matchup that I wonder if it'll be a part of, Chad, your perfect parlay that'll be tipping off here in a couple of hours.
So Gonzaga was a 33-point favorite over Norfolk State. And I thought, that is way too many points for an NCAA tournament game. I don't care who you're playing. I think they won by 40-something in the game, right?
Yeah, they were up by 50 at one point.
It was unbelievable to watch them. The game was so out of control, I didn't watch much of it, even though I picked Gonzaga to win it all. But I turn it over there for 3 minutes. I see two fast break alley-oops that are two of the prettiest basketball plays I've ever seen. It is amazing to watch how highly efficient and how well that Gonzaga team plays together offensively. And they make it look so easy. crisp passes leading to a quick alley-oop on a fast break. The way they work their break, the way they work their half-court offense, they are remarkable to watch. I said it last week, guys. I am all in on Gonzaga. I have no prior affinity for the school, but especially once my school, Tennessee, was out of the tournament, I'm all in on the Zags. I hope Mark Few wins that national championship that's eluded the school. The one thing they haven't accomplished. They've played in a national championship game. They've been to Final Fours, but winning that national title, it's time. It's time for Gonzaga. I think they're the team to beat, Hutton. But if I had to pick them or the field, I'm still going the field because of the craziness we've already seen in this tournament.
So they'll take on Oklahoma, and then as you look through their bracket, they'll get Creighton or Ohio. From there, they'll face Iowa or Kansas if we just go chalk.
Iowa's really good.
And they struggled against Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
Out of the gate. Iowa did.
Everybody's going to struggle with everybody. I mean, I think we can't judge degree of difficulty. You know what I mean? If you get through, based on what we've seen, if you get through,
it was like Houston last night.
Yeah. I mean, Rutgers really mismanaged the clock like a bad football team. They were playing milk the clock with a 2-point lead like they were up 7 with 2 minutes left. It's no way to play. You know, it's a one-possession game. You've got to get in your offense and continue to score. I thought Rutgers did as bad a job in terms of handling game situation as anybody I saw. Now, there were stretches of games that I missed, obviously, and I'm a Rutgers fan. I went to Rutgers Prep. See my Rutgers Prep thing up there. It would have been great for Jersey to see them win that game. And Houston, to me, was disappointing. I thought Houston was a team that would blow a team like Rutgers out of the water. But Rutgers did not manage that game well at the end at all.
So my thing with Gonzaga is, and why I asked the question, it's a lot like the Chiefs from their Super Bowl run, where I think to myself, okay, they're going to come head-to-head with a defense that's going to be able to curtail what they're doing offensively. And now my perception is on Gonzaga, if you're facing them, can you put up 100 points? Because that's what it's going to take to beat them. Because they're going to score 90 on you.
That's another one of those examples, too. I think if you're beating them, they're going to have to be a big part of it, right? What are the odds, Hutton, that somebody plays very well against them and they have an off night? They shoot poorly.
Hasn't happened yet. BYU was a higher seed than what many thought they deserved because they played so well against Gonzaga.
Which I think, I still would have scored BYU up for that. Playing well against Gonzaga is an accomplishment.
I don't see that defensive-minded team, Hutton, that gives them problems like that. You're right. If they get into a game where they've got to gut one out, where some team's locking them up, which is going to be very hard to do.
See, I thought it was Virginia, but Virginia's no longer in their bracket.
Tony Bennett, 4 straight years as a very high seed in the tournament, goes out in the first round 3 times, once as a number 1 seed, and then wins a national title the 4th year. I mean, talking about feast or famine.
Yeah.
Won a national title and went out in very depressing fashion the other 3 years.
They missed their chance.
Which everyone would agree, Tony Bennett's one of the best coaches in college basketball.
They missed their chance to defend the title with the COVID cancellation.
So here's my matchup of fear for Gonzaga. And I've got this matchup in the Final Four. If they get a team like Florida State, that could cause them problems. Because Florida State, athletically, and the way Leonard Hamilton's teams play defense, that's one that could lock a Gonzaga up and get you into a middling, gutted-out defensive game where it's not high scoring. To me, that's the type of team that could be problematic for Gonzaga. But, I mean, what I've seen so far, I love the Zags.
Granted, it's one game, but
against Norfolk State.
I'm also judging half this field off of one game as games tip off today.
Yeah, sure. Now, here's what I did with Gonzaga, admitting stupidity, right? Because a lot of these teams that were big favorites, like Baylor, and I got burned on Baylor, but they were winning big, but they weren't winning as big as you expected. So I watched Norfolk State for a while, and they were kind of hanging, and it looked like, they'll lose by 20, 25, but they're not losing by 30. So I waited.
How about the jab, by the way? Sorry. The Norfolk State reminded me of the jab to the gut.
Oh,
the cheap shot.
Yeah. Which is great if they didn't realize. I mean, that's playground basketball. So I said, I said to myself, they're not going to lose by 33. And so I waited for a live spread for things to get to, I think I got 32.5. And I'm like, they're not losing by 32.5. Bet them. Then I wasn't even watching that game, and I'm watching the score just go and go and go. And I'm like, there's another genius bet by Cars.
So a few stats that just blew my mind over the weekend with some teams in Power 5 conferences. Your Rutgers Scarlet Knights, Paul, not been to the Sweet 16 since 1979 and blew that chance to go to the Sweet 16.
I lived
1979.
in New Jersey for 3 years at that point.
Two other ones. Oregon State, who's now in the Sweet 16, that win over Tennessee, their first tournament win in 40 years.
Power 5 program.
That is difficult for a Power 5 program to not win a tournament game, not to have 1 year where you've got a senior-heavy team where you win a first-round game.
And we'll talk about
for 40
what a
years
proud moment that was for a UT alum next hour.
Yeah, right. And then, but still, 40 years. Oregon State should be embarrassed. No, they should be happy now. They're in the Sweet 16. The third one, Arkansas, 25 years since they've been in the Sweet 16.
Really?
With all of that basketball history, 1996.
That makes me feel old.
Nolan Richardson was the head coach the last time Arkansas got to a Sweet 16.
I'm not surprised by that. I'm surprised that Nolan Richardson was 25 years ago already.
Which also provoked Eric Musselman, friend of OutKick, Todd Furman, just got put on blast by Eric Musselman after the game for saying they were at a coaching disadvantage.
Against Chris Beard.
Against Chris Beard, right. And while I will say it was funny to hear him go after Todd Furman that way after the game, I would also say I don't know that it was a masterpiece of coaching down the stretch from Eric Musselman as they almost blew a double-digit lead. I don't think they really did anything to prevent Texas Tech. Texas Tech got in their own way late. Mac McClung, 88% free throw shooter, misses the front end of a 1-and-1, down one with 1:12 left, and then you had the missed layup that Paul mentioned earlier that did them in.
So, Hut, you've liked Arkansas through these two games.
I like their athleticism.
Here we get to the point where we usually talk about, hey, we've enjoyed the hell out of Oral Roberts, beating Ohio State, beating Florida. Now they're in the Sweet 16. This is often where that kind of team, they have this glorious week now with all of the attention for getting there, and they get to face a big SEC team, a 15 versus a 3. Usually this is where it ends. Not always, but usually. What are you still on the Arkansas train?
Well, I was on the Oral Roberts train in round 1 too.
Yeah, you were.
And the reason for that is they make 13 threes a game on average.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to shoot the three well.
They shoot free throws also.
You can hang with an athletic team like Arkansas who's going to run up and down the floor at a high rate, high possession rate, if you're going to make that type of three-point range percentage. So they're in it. I think they could advance Oral Roberts against Arkansas.
I mean, that's a super compelling game after what you've seen, right? The anticipation. Now you hope, Oral Roberts doesn't have to win it, but you want them to play well enough that they don't need a validation sticker, right? They deserve to be there by every means. But you want that to be a three-point game.
This is where those games get boring. Unfortunately, when you have the team that advances to the Sweet 16, this is where Arkansas comes out and wins a ho-hum 15, 17-point game against Oral Roberts.
But don't you feel things are shifting? Things are shifting.
Every time we say that, these teams get to the Sweet 16 and they suck once they get to the next round.
What was Butler the first time it went to the Final Four?
It's funny you bring up Butler
12?
because I talked about Gonzaga. Butler was the Gonzaga of the Midwest for a while, right?
Yeah.
With Brad Stevens, they've fallen off a bit
They couldn't
now.
keep their coach.
But they were that school.
What were they the first time they went to the Final Four? Had to be
They were
11 or 12.
Yeah, probably. But, it's Oral Roberts, for example, all right, 15 seed. Also, think about this. Arkansas Oral Roberts played December 20th of this year, and Arkansas won by 11. Did anyone think at that moment this was a Sweet 16 preview?
Of course not.
Between these two teams when they played each other. So
Just
they've
the
already played
randomness
once
of the
this
draw
year.
to put them together is crazy.
I think Oral Roberts is a great story. I think Arkansas blows them out. I think that's typically what happens. Now, the difference is Loyola was way underseeded as an 8. They are not an 8 seed. They are one of the
6 at
12 or 15 best teams in the country. They didn't have the schedule where they got to play all these Power 5 teams, but I'm watching them and I'm thinking this is a legit national championship Final Four contender that got underseeded. I think the same thing about LSU right now as an 8 seed. That is a Final Four contender, talent-wise, that got underseeded as an 8 because they did not have a good non-conference.
And that'll be a good game
outside of
today
the
against
SEC.
Michigan.
I should also bring up, we were talking Gonzaga, And as I look through Arkansas's path to the Final Four or Oral Roberts, it's going through Baylor. And as you consider what Baylor has done early in this tournament, they've been just as dominant. Before we even see Gonzaga play later today, Baylor got after Hartford, as you might expect, but then
1 point too
Wisconsin.
few. Yeah.
You know, that really wasn't much of a game to watch yesterday
No.
as Baylor took on the Big
13
Ten.
points.
Especially after Wisconsin had a game not to watch in the first round as they blew out North Carolina in that game. It's
Villanova next. You know, Villanova's they play at a nice pace. They're a fun team to watch, but I would take Baylor in that too. They're very good. Houston is not nearly as good as I expected based on what I saw against Rutgers.
something we'll talk a lot more about as this tournament rolls on with Baylor. Is there a better program recovery coaching job than Scott Drew at Baylor,
Really good.
who's been there since 2003? It's crazy to think about, but this was a program where their head coach covered up murder on their team. Not only NCAA payment issues, but they had a coach cover up one player murdering another player. And Scott Drew is coming there, and they are next year's the greatest recruiting class in program history coming in. This is a team that's going to compete for 4- and 5-star players in a program as long as Scott Drew is there. It is remarkable. A program with not much basketball history coming off of that scandal. Granted, it was 18 years ago, but still, you look at what Scott Drew has done at Baylor. We'll have our buddy John McClain, noted Baylor alum, on at some point to talk about it. I'm hard-pressed to think of a better rebuilding job and then building up a program to elite status. There's a few of them in this tournament. Porter Moser at Loyola, Mark Few at Gonzaga. Dan Monson, though, got it started for Mark Few at Gonzaga. It wasn't just him. They were in the Sweet 16 before he was there. And then now with Scott Drew at Baylor. Just incredible job.
You guys have a parlay going today at FanDuel?
Not yet.
I do.
My parlay today, UCLA, I'm taking UCLA minus 4.5. They tip off against Abilene Christian. The Bruins have looked great since, the 9-minute mark of the play-in game against Michigan State.
Yes.
I'm riding with that, even though Abilene Christian forced 23 Texas turnovers over the weekend. I'm taking UCLA, giving the points. I'm taking Ohio with Preston, Jason Preston. He had 11 points, 13 rebounds, 8 or 9 assists. I mean, when you consider the triple-double aspect of what he brings to the court and what he did against Virginia.
Yeah, Creighton just squeaked by UCSB.
Right, I wasn't buying Creighton going into the tournament. I'm taking Ohio and the 5.5. And LSU gets 5 points. We knew this was going to be a tough game for any one seed, for LSU as the 8 seed in a bracket, but Michigan here, I like LSU to win outright. They are rejuvenated, winning 5 of 6, nearly advanced past the nearly SEC champions when you consider what they did here in Nashville. They have to hit the glass. Michigan, big. They've got a very tall lineup that is great at rebounding. If LSU can at least match Michigan on the boards, the Tigers win this game outright.
I went to my trusty FanDuel app to pull up my parlay that I placed this morning. Like you, Hutton, I've got UCLA minus 4.5. I think the Abilene Christian story is a great one. I think it ends in the second round. I've got a game that's actually going on right now. I've got Iowa minus 5 against Oregon. That game is tied at 36 right now in the first half. High scoring already between those two. And then I've got Florida State minus 1.5 against Colorado. Colorado, you could argue, maybe the best performance in the first round of anyone. I mean, they look great against Georgetown in that game. And Colorado, a very, I think, underrated team, even though they're a 5 seed in this tournament. I've got Florida State going to the Final Four. I love Leonard Hamilton's team. They're minus 1.5. I've got the Seminoles in that one.
That's a good game tonight that tips off at 7:45 Eastern, 6:45 local time. Final game of the night, for those wondering what you'll be falling asleep to potentially, Kansas and USC, 3 and a 6. That game tips off at 9:40 Eastern, and that is a CBS network game.
I may, not having pledged my affinity for any of these games on our fine broadcast, be wise to step back today.
Today's the day where you get the momentum back, Paul.
That's right.
Today's the day where
Chase,
you get the
chase.
momentum
My college
back.
buddies would be like, just chase.
Change your
Chase.
circumstances, Paul.
Chase.
Change your circumstances.
Double your bet and chase.
That's right.
Other headlines when we return, Deshaun Watson news with the attorney, Tony Busby, taking the complaints to the Houston District Attorney and those accusations. So it goes from civil to what could be a criminal case, potentially, if the district attorney wants to take that to the grand jury. That will be coming up. Also, we'll get into that. The Patriots appear to be high on one particular quarterback in the NFL draft. And Urban Meyer, not a fan of NFL free agency.
Wow.
All that and more coming up next on OutKick 360.
How I met David Reed. He was around the radio station all the time, and I thought he was a great guy. We wind up in conversations and stuff. And then I won a suite to Nashville Predators game, and Hutton and Withrow were both doing high school basketball championship games, and I needed somebody who was a co-representative of the station. Reed wasn't our producer yet, but I invited him, and I thought, this guy plays softball, he'll come out and drink some beers with us. Found out that night Reed doesn't drink. But turns out his fiance, the lovely Lindsay, was in the box, so I was really Cupid in terms of getting them together. And we've grown to be great friends. Couldn't be more thrilled that he's at OutKick 360 with us. One of the greatest guys you'll ever meet, and so skilled at what he does behind the scenes. He's a bigger part of the show than anybody knows.
OutKick 360 on the OutKick OTT network. Follow us on Twitter at OutKick 360 and like us, share us on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube. Please subscribe to the OutKick channel. Just search out OutKick and then like the OutKick 360 broadcast.
Did you guys hear that?
Many are doing right now. No, what do you say?
There's a huge thud from back there. I'm sure you heard. It sounded like David Reed, personal earthquake.
I think people who were sticking through the break just saw Paul Kuharski explain how he met one David Reed, and then right as that promo was concluding, we hear a noise in the back, and we believe David Reed dropped something.
Reed,
So
you didn't like
hopefully
that
he's okay.
commercial?
He couldn't imagine the compliments, I don't think. That was the problem with it.
Drop my donuts, guys.
Oh,
Those are some heavy
Donuts on the
donuts.
floor.
Are they dog donuts?
drop some donuts. Nothing to see here. Reed's got plenty more where those came from. If any hit the ground, he's got a lot more left.
I saw on social media where a handful of people that were commenting with Reed and then sending out their convenience store dog treats and asking Reed's
rated?
review of them. Like, hey, well, my dog liked this.
Hey, you guys know how well I've been eating and how I traditionally have had these late night incidents in my house. You know?
Yeah.
Somebody will say, somebody had a cookie incident last night. I had an incident on Friday overnight, Saturday. Started as a pistachio
Right after we got
incident,
home?
which not right after, but I came home. I kind of fell asleep for a while, so tired.
Then
from
later,
it. And then when
So
I'm
tired.
awake in the middle of the night, I have nothing to.
So tired from the watch
nothing
party.
to do. Yeah, very tired.
Very tired.
And
Slightly
so
groggy.
I ate a lot of pistachio nuts, and after I had the pistachio nuts, which I thought, hey, these will make me work a little bit, it'll slow me down. Then I was like, well, there's some tag-alongs in that closet. I'll have just a couple tag-alongs. And then after I ate about 10 tag-alongs, I was like, well, that's the first cookie incident in 2 months.
Speaking of, there will be more. There will be more incidents with Paul. Speaking of the OutKick VIP watch party, you can go to outkick.com/VIP360. That is where you can sign up to become an OutKick VIP. 30% off VIP access right now with the code OK360. You have exclusive access with us, with Clay Travis. You have access to events like we hosted this past week at 6th and Peabody. We're going to have VIP forums, which you can be a part of 24/7. We're a part of those as well. Also gear. You can check out the OutKick gear. It's all available, outkick.com/VIP360. One of the headlines from the tournament this past week.
Can I get into one thing quickly, though?
Please.
Because what we do on this show is we take things on air. We take things onto the program, whether it happened during the break, like David Reed dropping donuts. If our guys Lance or Jacob do or say something funny during the breaks, which they do often, we'll take it on the show. So I do have to ask Paul, what is going on our YouTube feed right now? By the way, like us on YouTube if you're watching. That helps. But there is a chat on the YouTube feed.
Yes.
I've never been involved in a YouTube chat in my life, but we're getting reports on Twitter, which, by the way, that's a great place to interact with us on Twitter at OutKick360. Let us know what you want to hear from us there. But, Paul, you've been monitoring the YouTube feed.
There seem to be some complaints that I'm not
That you're not Clay?
ranting enough.
Is that the complaint?
Well, I said that the shooting near the rim in the basketball, I was upset by that. But if you want me to rant constantly, that's not what I'm going to do. I'll rant when I have something
This is
to
like
rant
the
about.
reverse
It's not
talk
perpetual
sports
rant.
guy, right? We get talk sports a lot on previous shows. Is this like the talk politics guy?
Yeah,
Is someone screaming at you to talk cancel culture? What's going on?
I won't be ranting perpetually. I'll be ranting when there's something worth ranting about. If I rant about everything, then that takes the power out of the rant. This is like somebody I'm thinking very clearly of who I know likes everything. And by liking everything, he really likes nothing. See, that takes the power out of it. So when I rant, it will have meaning because I'll be ranting about something that upsets me. But if nothing right this moment upsets me, I'm not going to make up a rant. That's not what I will be doing here. Also, somebody said, what's more useless, Isiah Wilson or me with a comb? This man has eyes and has discovered that I'm bald and has come with sophisticated, fantastic humor.
Paul's never heard that one before.
The answer is Isiah Wilson.
In the YouTube
Paul
chat,
could find body hair to comb.
right.
Isiah Wilson has no use right now.
If I'm monitoring the YouTube chat and we're going to engage in comedy, we're going to be following my first rule of comedy. Here comes a rant because it's necessary. My first rule of comedy is, Jakob's going to love this, be funny. The first rule of comedy. So in the YouTube chat and all your interactions with us, I ask for everyone to follow the first rule of comedy. Be funny. Thank you, boys.
That was great. No, I really put that up for you. Just float it in the
How'd I
air.
do?
You crushed it out of the park. Well
Thank you. I
done.
want to apologize for the shirt, which I didn't feel is a small pattern. If you look closely at it, it's really stripes. But on the broadcast, it comes across as a small pattern. and I shouldn't wear small pattern shirts.
I think
so
it's
this won't
easy
make
to
another
say.
appearance.
Let's go ahead and get this out too. We're day 6 of the show, and Paul is far more interested in how he looks than either Hutton or myself on camera.
Well, I've got
like you came in
Hutton's
first
got
off. You
TV
look great.
experience.
You lost weight coming in. We did not, but you lost weight coming in.
I did not.
I did not. I went. Yeah.
Hutton's
I
got
kept
TV,
eating.
regular TV experience.
Oh, I'll be
He's
eating.
concerned with
I'll
how
be
he
eating.
looks.
Don't you worry.
He's concerned with how he looks. He just doesn't vocalize.
But yeah, but you're
planning
you
out
seem
your
very,
wardrobe.
You seem very concerned about how you look. On camera.
We're now a broadcast show. We should be concerned with how we look.
What will you be wearing tomorrow, Paul?
I'll probably wear purple now that you got the purple out of the way.
Here's
If
what
I
I've
went
discovered.
short sleeves today, I would have worn purple.
Paul, here's what I've discovered about people in my 39 years on Earth. If they don't like you or they want to find a way to be miserable, they're going to find something to
I don't care
comment
what
about
they
your
think about the
appearance.
shirt. I worry about what I look like in the shirt.
I know, but
wanna
you
feel good
still
about
will
how I
allow
look.
someone to comment, and then it's going to get in your head about the pattern being too big.
Nobody
or
said
something
anything
like that.
about it. I
But like
said
the guy's violating the first rule of comedy, talking about you not needing a brush. That guy's going to find something wrong with one of us because he doesn't like us, and he's going to talk
Also,
about it.
I like to
Can't worry
imagine
about it.
this man is like the clean bill of health typing on his computer right now.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
From
Okay,
his
here's
mom's couch.
so this is the perfect segue into an actual sports story, right? The guy who finds the reason to be pissed off at the world no matter what's going on. And if he doesn't like you, he just wants to share that he doesn't like you. Similar to the person who will send threats to the college basketball player when he misses free throws that cost your team the game. E.J. Liddell is the story with Ohio State. They're now investigating it, which, by the way, I love this. If someone sends you threats that you don't know, or even if you do know them on social media, they should be investigated. There should be something done about it. At the very least, everyone should know who this person is.
Used the N-word several times. Did he say I'll search you out and hurt you, kill you?
There was
it
a
vile.
lot.
He
that
tried
was said.
everything.
It was vile what he said. And this guy tweeted this stuff out. And I love when people share screenshots of this was a text or a DM. It was a DM, I think.
Right, it was a DM.
You know, with the guy miss a foul shot.
I think
and
he
the
shared-
guy just retweeted
Yes.
it
He
and said,
shared
"What did I do
two
to deserve
different-
this? I'm human."
He shared 2 different rants. Both were Instagram DMs, is what it looked like to me.
Get some perspective in your life if you're treating somebody like this. It means more to that guy who missed the shot than it means to you. That's what you got to keep in perspective. That guy's tortured by what happened to him in the game more than you are. Trust us. If you don't get that, trust people who are around athletes more often than you are. It tortures them more than it tortures you. But they also have a capacity for getting over it because they understand in the grand scheme of things, it's just a foul shot, it's just a jumper, it's just a basketball game, it's a small piece of life. And if it means that much to you, you've got to get yourself some perspective.
I'm fine with sports meaning a lot to fans and for them to be very happy or very upset. But like you said, Paul, the perspective part of it, but also just whatever you're thinking in the moment and how angry you are, don't send it to the person you're angry at in that moment. Like I
Send
think
it to
just
your text chain
just
of
in
fan
general,
buddies.
like if you want to go on a rant, you know, Danny White, Tennessee's new athletic director, said, well, maybe text a buddy. Instead of immediately going to social media and calling for the firing of a coach and the decertification of scholarships for every player after a loss, maybe just text a buddy and then get it out that way. Your Vols text chain or your Ohio State text chain or your Gonzaga text chain.
Well,
go to them and complain before picking up your phone and finding that player on Instagram and deciding to go at them directly on message.
It is another example of people saying things on social media they would never say to this guy's
The
face.
dehumanization of
They would
humans.
never say this happens in all walks of life, but specifically in sports. After a big game, after a heartbreaking loss, whatever it might be, this was just a direct message to my knowledge. It wasn't even a live tweet
Right.
to the public, to the masses. But there are no ramifications for that either. And I know this is something that Clay will harp on later today for OutKick the Show, but he said it over the weekend. You should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law based on threats made on social media. And that's the case here, especially with some of the threats that Liddell is receiving.
And why would you
off
think
of
that would be
this.
private? If you're DMing me nastily like that, why would you think I would keep that private? Oh, I'm going to keep that between you and I?
Well, this same fan, these fans, plural, because it wasn't just one. He just happened to screenshot one. have probably done this thousands of times combined. And now you finally have an athlete that's willing to put it out socially.
But it's the psychology of it. Certain things you can explain with, okay, I get why that person did that because of the psychology behind it or the reason they acted in a certain way. I don't know how that makes you feel better and then makes you stay feeling better. Don't you feel really bad after doing that?
I think they're just not thinking about feeling.
But I mean, I can
venting
understand
thing where
like
you feel better
it's
after you get off your
cathartic that I
chest.
let this guy know how pissed off I am that Ohio State's not out of the tournament.
I really told him.
In the moment, but then don't you come back and even 30 seconds later think, boy, I really hope he doesn't read that.
No, but you guys.
I
know
hope
how
he
this
doesn't
works.
see what I just sent to him because it felt good for me to hit send.
Yeah.
But it's not going to feel good for me knowing this kid or this player is going to read what I sent and then feel really bad.
You guys know how this works because we've dealt with it all on a much lesser level than this. But as soon as somebody comes at you, when you come back,
Like
and
this
they're
guy
like,
telling you
oh,
to get a
there's a
brush.
human being on the other side of this, then all of a sudden the tone softens. When there's an actual exchange, and it's not just a picture of somebody, but it's a three-dimensional person on the other side of it, what happens? 9 out of 10 times, all of a sudden the tone softens and everything changes, right?
A couple of other headlines out there. Deshaun Watson accusations are going to be considered by Houston District Attorney today. Tony Busby, the attorney, says he plans to submit affidavits and evidence from several women alleging inappropriate conduct and sexual assault against Deshaun Watson. He's going to present that to the district attorney. If the district attorney in Houston chooses to move forward, that evidence would then be presented in front of a grand jury, which could then take this to a criminal court.
I want to be in a grand jury.
There we see what happens there. Watson's lawyer, Rusty Hardin, said that Watson is going to publicly address the allegations of sexual assault in the coming days. This was like 48 hours ago.
That'd be interesting.
So we'll see how they go about doing that. The Patriots are apparently high on Justin Fields. It is rumor mill season for the NFL draft. It's going to take some maneuvering for the Patriots to move up high enough to get the Ohio State quarterback, but that tells you their line of thinking after re-signing Cam Newton. The expectation is they are going to draft a quarterback. Many have them tied to Mac Jones. Reports
more
are
in
from
range.
Jeremy. I think it was Jeremiah. Daniel Jeremiah, who said that it would be Ohio State quarterbacks, Justin Fields, that they're high on, not
Where
Mac
are
Jones.
they drafting?
Well, they
High
12th,
teens?
I believe.
Yeah.
12th or 13th.
Yeah.
And-
Sounds right.
It costs to get up 4 spots, which 5 spots, 8 spots.
Urban Meyer, not a fan of the free agency process. I have to say I don't disagree with his line of thinking here. It's just not going to change.
Yeah, what he says makes perfect sense. It's ridiculous to be making these huge investments where you can't even get together with the guy for dinner to get to know him.
You sign these guys without meeting them. He says it calls for bad business. And if you look at what Jacksonville's done, I think they've made 11 acquisitions. 7 of the 11 have ties to their coaching staff.
Which is the case in a lot of places, right? But the thing is, I don't know. I don't really want to hear from Urban Meyer on things like this yet, where he just signed up to come into the league and do these sorts of things, and now he's going to stand on his podium and tell us about what's wrong with it. Well, if you don't want to do these sorts of things, then stay in college where you control it.
Well, I mean, the next thing he's going to say is, when you're not allowed to meet with a player before bringing them into your organization, you end up with an Aaron Hernandez-like situation. Oh, wait. Oh, he did have a chance to meet with Aaron Hernandez, and he coached him for years and had apparently no inkling that the guy was a serial killer. So I don't want to hear about Urban Meyer on matters of character judgment when it comes to players that play for him. Any other coach, I agree with what he's saying. Ideally, you'd be able to meet with the free agent and talk to them and vet them out, but from the guy who harbored Aaron Hernandez in school and allowed him to play after shooting incidents at Florida also, I do not want to be hearing this.
Well said.
He can be talking out of both sides of his mouth and be accurate. I mean, whenever he's saying
He's not
organizational decisions are being made and you're paying guys millions of dollars, but yet you really don't even have a chance to meet them. They're not even coming to your city. I mean, very rarely do we see it. Kenny Galladay just did it for the Giants.
Yeah.
and he signed a 4-year agreement where he went into town. Adoree Jackson's doing it today with the Giants and reportedly the Philadelphia Eagles. Kirk Cousins did it whenever he signed with Minnesota. But very rarely do guys have to do anything other than pick up the phone and talk to their agent on day 1 or day 2 of the big money free agency period.
It's very true. And that changed, in a matter of a couple of years. It used to be guys were visiting right at the beginning, and now that's gone by the wayside. Part of what I'd like to talk about in the Tennessee Hour is just how dramatically different free agent guys are seen. I think a lot of Tennessee fans were relieved to see Adoree Jackson go. So you can't pay that guy over $10 million a year for what he did last year and for the questions of heart upon his return from the injury. And in New York, I saw the Giants ESPN beat writer say, if they add Adoree Jackson to this free agent class, they've really killed it. As one man's trash is another man's treasure for sure. I think some people getting really excited, probably overexcited about Josh Reynolds. Why do some Titans fans really love some of these free agent acquisitions, overlove them, and really not like some that probably aren't as bad as they think? I want to talk a little bit about those valuations.
Hour 1 in the books. Coming up, the Tennessee Power Hour. We will discuss NFL free agency and the Tennessee Titans, but also the Tennessee Volunteers. You guys know that I judge teams based off a saying. It's not if you lose, it's how you lose. So what does that say about this Vols basketball team? That's next on OutKick 360. OutKick 360 on the OutKick OTT network and on Fox Sports Knoxville. Great to be on 1340 Fox Sports Knoxville as one of our affiliates, the first affiliate for OutKick 360 coverage. Alongside Chad Withrow and Paul Kowarski, I'm Jonathan Hutton, and it is the Tennessee Power Hour, which means all things Tennessee this hour. Titans, Vols, and eventually we're going to get to Preds coverage and other things as the headlines warrant.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But
Preds
the
aren't
headlines,
warranting it.
Maybe on the Preds.
The headlines today, the Tennessee Volunteers, and that abysmal performance that we saw against Oregon State. Credit Oregon State in the Sweet 16. They have been playing well going into the tournament. I thought Tennessee had been playing well going into the tournament. And the Vols made me look foolish. I had the Vols going to the Sweet 16, and it was anything but that from a type of performance. Let's put it this way. They played like they didn't want to be there. That's the team that took the floor on Friday afternoon, Chad.
Well, it was disappointing, and Rick Barnes said this. There was stage fright with the freshmen, which I don't get. But both of them looked scared for the first 30 minutes of the game. Jaden Springer and Keon Johnson.
Stage fright for guys who apparently are going to the draft.
Yeah, I don't.
Crazy.
Right?
And look, I'm sure they grew up watching that tournament, and maybe there was some nervous energy with that, but you would think the nervous energy would lead you to play harder and not just so scared offensively that you're paralyzed. Tennessee looked paralyzed in that game. Oregon State, granted, give them credit. They're playing great. They played great in that game. They shot well. Tennessee gave them way too many open shots. Tennessee had open shots they could not connect on. They took bad shots also throughout the game. Their offense was bad. They'd have a chance to go up and score and try to make an extra pass and throw it out of bounds routinely on a fast break. It was disappointing. And, guys, this is the knock on Rick Barnes. And it's the one that's warranted. I will defend Rick Barnes all the time against a number of different critiques. He's a bad tournament coach. The record bears it out. I don't know what happens to his teams in the tournament. He's really not figured it out over the course of his career. Now, I'll also argue when you look at Shaka Smart not winning a tournament game, I think that he was underappreciated for the great job he did at Texas. There's no basketball tradition at Texas until Rick Barnes got there, and for 20 years won at a very high level. So I think that's some of it, and some of it's unfair criticism, but this team, for whatever reason, could never figure it out. They would look great against Kansas. They'd look terrible for 2 games. They'd look okay for a couple games. They'd look bad. Bottom line, they never knew how to play with each other. There was never any cohesion. They never figured it out offensively. They never knew where their teammate was going to be at any given time. And for that reason, you get blown out in your first round of the NCAA tournament. That's what happened.
One thing on Barnes that strikes me, there are a lot of very good college basketball coaches who struggled in the tournament for a very long time and then ultimately broke through. I'm thinking of Boeheim in particular. You guys might think of other names. But it took them a long time. They became known with a reputation like Barnes had. And then ultimately, finally, they got there. Barnes maybe has that breakthrough someday, but it seems like his has just lasted an extended period.
Well, what's fair on Barnes this season? How good was this Tennessee team that he was actually coaching?
Well, the talent maybe not as good as we judged it to be.
Well,
I think the thinking
pre-season they were judged to be extremely talented. But is that a media creation, or is that something that devolved as the season went on, then ultimately ends up with what we saw, and that's on Barnes?
I think what happened, this is how I'd sum up the season. They started out great because early in the season, coming off of a pandemic also, and everything that went into that, defense wins. I think defensively they're very well skilled, they're very well trained. They were good defensively pretty much throughout the year. So I think they got off to that. I think it was a 10-0 start. Yep. Based on defense. But as teams play together more, Arkansas is a great example. Moses Moody comes in as a freshman. They're not clicking on all cylinders early. They get red hot and carry that out because they start to figure each other out and they develop a flow offensively. Other teams got better as the year went on. Tennessee didn't because they never got any flow. Couple reasons. One, their 2 most talented players were their 2 freshmen. They didn't really start to assert themselves until later in the year. But these two freshmen know one style, and that is an AAU one-on-one style. They weren't great together at any point. It wasn't like Jaden Springer and Keon Johnson were great as a duo dishing off to each other. They were great going one-on-one or taking the ball to the basket. The other factor is John Fulkerson wasn't very good throughout the year. Yves Pons wasn't great offensively. He's just not a great offensive player. But I think you combine all those things, and it just goes back to it was a poor coaching job, top to bottom, offensively this year, and it was a poor job of meshing as a team. And that's why you got the results you did.
And some of that, I agree with all of that. Some of the meshing as a team thing, look, you have to forecast some of that, but some of that you can't know. You're just kind of counting on it to come together. And once in a while, and this has maybe been the case too often with Barnes, once in a while you have a team that just doesn't come together the right way, and it's an unfortunate thing. I'm not trying to make an excuse for Barnes. I'm just saying you see it sometimes. Football, basketball, whatever the sport, a team that doesn't come together the right way is the undoing of a season.
We saw flashes of it, though, and we saw raw talent and potential gel early on and then start to come back together towards the end of the regular season and tournament time. And then that team that we thought was coming back together shows up in Indianapolis and looks like that. Yeah. I made the comment to you during the watch party on Friday, Paul. I thought when you see some of these jumpers they were taking, it looked like you just rolled the basketballs out in the middle of the Y. I'm exaggerating a bit here, but you just roll them out for warm-up shots before you even start getting going in your routine or the figure eight for practice, Chad. They were just taking little jumpers as if they're just trying to get loose. And everything felt tight, but at the same time, the mannerisms and just the feel of that game, it felt like they didn't want to be there. And that it was.
And Oregon State had such a different feel.
Yeah.
So the contrast, Oregon State didn't have any of that early. We haven't been in the tournament tightness or anything.
They made
like
it
that.
easy on Oregon State.
But remember, last week we talked about you're going to tell pretty early on the teams that are tired of being stuck in the bubble and just staying in their hotel room or in a hotel lobby, and then going to a practice or a workout, then going to a game, and that want the season to end. I know Rick Barnes said before the SEC tournament that the season took a toll on his team, and he said, I think most college basketball players are just ready for it to be over and ready for the season to be over. Tennessee looked like a team that was ready for it to be over. Regardless of how excited their fans were about the tournament and a chance of redemption at a very uneven regular season, they did not appear excited at all. They had about 1 5-minute spurt where they got it to 10 with about 8 or 9 minutes left where I thought that, okay, here they come. They started pressing. They got a couple turnovers. They were playing at a different intensity level. But outside of that, Oregon State wanted it more. They got it. And now for Rick Barnes, you've tried the one-and-done route. You're going to have another one coming in next year. Not a bad thing. They need a point guard. They got the number one point guard in the country coming in Kennedy Chandler. Rick Barnes does better with developmental players. He did better with Grant Williams and Admiral Schofield than he did with Keon Johnson and Jaden Springer, 2 probable lottery picks after 1 year at Tennessee. So you got to readjust the roster and find out what you need. They haven't done great with transfers. And this is a team that's going to be heavy in the transfer market. Walker Kessler, right before we went on air today, announces that he's transferring from North Carolina. That's a 7-footer that Tennessee was one of the 3 or 4 finalists for. They're going to be in the market for him. They need a proven big man to transfer in. There's a lot of roster decisions now for Rick Barnes about approach and what they want to be as a program that they were 2 years ago in his deepest run in the tournament, had a great shot at getting to the Elite Eight, lost in overtime to Purdue in the Sweet 16. What do they want to be now? Because now it's a program that can get one-and-dones with the success they've had. Do they want to keep going that route? Or do they want to be that developmental program they were 2, 3, 4 years ago?
I agree with what you're saying about how it appeared as though they didn't want to be there. There's only 2 or 3 teams I would point out that gave off that vibe with their first game. Tennessee, of course, but Georgetown's the other. Like, who else from this weekend, from this great first and second round matchup weekend, could you say, you know what, that looks like a team that's just had enough of the COVID season.
Tennessee was
They're
bottom
tired
3.
of being locked up. They're ready to go back to whatever university they're from. They're ready to go back to Knoxville. Tennessee and Georgetown look like those teams. I can't name another university that showed up in Indy and looked like that gave off that impression.
North Carolina got beat by 30, and they were done early. I mean, I think North Carolina was one that, that's North Carolina. They've got some guys headed to the NBA also. They're probably not thrilled with being in the 8-9 game to start, and I thought Wisconsin looked supremely motivated in that game. I mean, there were a few examples. Tennessee was just always a team that they allowed their offensive problems to affect the way they looked on the court. And that was evident early on. We were sitting there, and I'm saying, I don't know if Tennessee's going to score 15 points by halftime. They were at 9 for about 8 or 9 minutes in the game, stuck at 9 points. I mean, it was an atrocious performance. But, again, for Tennessee to go out that way, it's got to force some re-examining of what they want to be. I think John Fulkerson's going to come back. I really do. I don't think he wants his Tennessee career to end with an elbow to the face and getting a concussion and being knocked out of the postseason. I think there's a good chance he comes back. Will they have someone step up to the level of Josiah Jordan-James? I thought he made a big leap from year 1 to year 2. Can he make a bigger leap in year 3? And then do you get something from someone else? Is there a surprise on the roster that isn't even playing right now? Devontae Gaines. Does he take a big step where he's a contributor next year? You add that in with Kennedy Chandler coming in, Tennessee's going to be a tournament team. They're going to be expected to be a tournament team again next year. Those expectations aren't leaving anytime soon. They're no longer the underdog. They're no longer picked second to last in the SEC and winning the conference. They are going to be a team picked in the top 5 or 6 that's expected to go to the NCAA tournament. They did a terrible job playing to expectations this year. Will they adjust and be better next year? That's on Rick Barnes, who I believe is going to lose an assistant or two again this year because guys on his staff are getting interviews for mid-major head coaching jobs. That's going to be another issue with Tennessee moving forward with some of those guys who have been recruiting for them. So you leave this season with more questions than answers.
How much has he had to replace since he's been to Tennessee?
A year ago, Rob Lanier left for Georgia State, and that was his top assistant. Kim English is interviewing at George Mason right now. He's been there 1 year, but he's thought of as an up-and-coming, big-time head coaching prospect, former NBA player and played at Missouri. And I think Des Oliver is another guy he had head coaching interviews a year ago. He's going to get more now. I think he took his name out of the running for one job that he interviewed for already. But these are the top assistants for Tennessee.
I would think people want to work for Rick Barnes. I mean, I would.
Mike Schwartz is another one who got an interview recently that we've had a chance to interview. Who's a bright basketball mind. He's their defensive coordinator.
That's an
for
attractive.
Tennessee.
That's an attractive job, and him bringing people in who are then coveted is a good thing for the university, for the program.
Any chance Springer comes back if he doesn't get the review he wants? Keon Johnson's a lottery pick, right?
Yeah. Keon Johnson.
If Springer doesn't get that type of evaluation, is there any chance he comes back? The last one and done was Tobias Harris, right?
So it's interesting with Springer because it's so all over the board where he's projected. I went to the Ringer and I'm looking at an NBA draft preview and he was the 13th prospect listed. Keon Johnson was 6th, so they have him as a lottery pick. And you go to, I think, the ESPN rankings, he's 27th.
Right.
So he's borderline first or second round. So it's all going to come down to the reliable people that are talking to him and finding out where he projects. If he's a borderline first, second round player, I think he'd be wise to come back and be the guy. I mean, if Jaden Springer comes back, he was the leading scorer this year at 12.5 points per game. He is going to be the scorer for Tennessee and the go-to guy a year from now. So that'll be interesting. I would still be shocked if either him or Keon Johnson. Keon Johnson definitely gone. But if Jaden Springer comes back, I'd be shocked for Tennessee if that happened.
There's a lot that happened for news-wise over the weekend with the Vols, of course, but also the Tennessee Titans. We get into Isiah Wilson, who did he last 3 full days in Miami with the Dolphins?
Well, not in Miami, but
with the Dolphins
on their roster.
We get into that. Where does Adoree Jackson land? And what have the Titans done at wide receiver? That is straight ahead on the Tennessee Power Hour here on OutKick 360.
So I don't remember the first time I met Chad Withrow, but to me, he was a complete disciple of George Plaster, a piece of dinosaur radio in Nashville. And I wanted nothing to do with that. Hutton and I were going to be paired together, but we didn't know who the third guy was. Clay Travis called me, put in a word for him, and the boss wanted me to sit down with him, and we had a good chat. It went pretty well. I said, I want Joey Kent, but if I can't have Joey Kent, this guy seems like he'll be all right.
OutKick 360 and the Tennessee Power Hour with Chad Withrow and Paul Kuharski. I'm Jonathan Hutton. Chad, where can you find us for the podcast?
You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, Jonathan Hutton. That's where you can find us. Apple, iTunes, Spotify, Audible, Bumble. I don't know where all you, honestly don't know. Hinge is another one that I've heard about lately. Every day I'm going to learn about it.
I don't know.
No, there's a thing called Hinge. Trust me, there's a thing called Hinge.
I was waiting on Chad's Grindr reference.
Yeah, Ashley Madison, I think, actually
There you go.
airs the podcast now. Yeah. So many different places you can get our podcast. It's amazing where all the places you can get us.
Amazon.
I'm just going to hear a different app every
Amazon.
day, and I'm just going to say it, and I'm going to end up saying something that's going to really get me in trouble because I'm going to have no clue what it is. But wherever you get your podcast, you can now get this
You can
OutKick
also
360 podcast.
You can order it at Amazon, and they have this thing where you could go pick it up in the locker at Whole Foods. You know about that?
No.
You order Amazon stuff, and instead of getting it delivered to your house, they can put it in a locker at Whole Foods. You go pick it up, so you could get.
Why would you? So what's what's the incentive for
Well, you
ordering
can
on
get
Amazon?
it same day at the locker if you're willing to go get it instead
But you
of
can't just
waiting
go to Whole
till
Foods and
tomorrow
buy it at
to
Whole
get
Foods.
them
You have to
delivered.
order on Amazon to get it
Well,
at Whole
no,
Foods?
like if you're ordering something that Whole Foods doesn't carry, Amazon will deliver it to Whole Foods to a locker today or to your house tomorrow. So if you're willing to meet them halfway, so to speak. So I'm saying you could get the podcast delivered to you
Halfway?
at Whole Foods and you go get it at the locker.
May I make a quick appeal to our audience?
Always.
So,
I love the permission that we ask of each other, knowing
well,
that we
you
don't
were
really
you
need
were on a
it
roll
for
with your
long.
Whole Foods thing, so I had to ask permission to break in and say this. Download our podcast, subscribe, rate, review. That's going to help us immensely. We are starting from scratch when it comes to a podcast. We got into the top 15 nationally of sports podcasts on iTunes a week ago, starting from scratch. We have to continue to grow this. Tell your friends, tweet about it, post on Facebook, do something like that. You may win something at some point for doing that. We don't know when, but we're going to give you something at some point. Do all these things, rate it, do all of that. That's going to help us big time. Also, if you go and leave a rating, I would ask that you leave a good one if you like what you hear. If not, don't leave anything. But if you go and find our podcast and in the rating you're complaining about us being on podcast, that's probably not the forum to leave that rating. We have a rating up there right now and a review from someone who is pissed that we're not on radio and says that he doesn't like podcasts. He's leaving this after having found us and said he loves the show, and he found us on podcast. I would expect the person that has those feelings are incapable of finding podcast. So if you're capable of finding a podcast, you go and find it, you know how to leave a review and leave a rating on there, but the review is that you don't like podcasts, that's not the forum to do so. But again, please rate, review, subscribe, do all these things. But if you want to go to our podcast page to tell us how you prefer radio to podcast, that is not the place to do so. Here's the other thing. We're coming to radio soon. Very, very soon.
Chad, I don't like this basketball game. It's not a football game.
Yes. Guys, normally I like basketball, but I hate basketball on television. I like it live. This is they're leaving on the March Madness app, watching it. I can't believe that we have the ability to watch this game on video streaming. I'd prefer to be there live. That's the equivalent.
Shout out to Fox Sports Knoxville, by the way, first radio affiliate carrying the show this evening.
We love them.
Here for OutKick
Can I
360.
quickly, sorry,
Yep.
I was going to quickly just say something back to the tournament for a moment.
Okay.
I don't know what took me so long to discover this, but I decided it while I was watching them lose, which I loved. I hate West Virginia. I don't know why I have not made this decree earlier. This is a school that felt it was appropriate to enroll Pac-Man Jones, who I saw the spot on a barroom floor where he smashed a guy's face in with the pool cue.
Yes.
I hate Bob Huggins, and he's now looks like Dracula on the sidelines with his mask, his beard poking out.
Someone
from
said
his
he also
mask.
looks like he's leading a Civil War reenactment
That
with
too.
that fluffy goatee that he has.
We could have a long stream of things about Bob Huggins' look. Morgantown it's okay, but it's in West Virginia. I don't like West Virginia, and I don't know what's taken me so long to make this decree. But among the schools that I do not like, I'm putting West Virginia much higher on the list. And I've never decreed that I don't
Wow.
care for West Virginia before. I hate West Virginia. Boom.
West Virginia is one of those schools I have no love for, but
I just
no
moved
hate
them
either.
from that
I'm very
column.
indifferent on West Virginia.
See, I was in that column, and I'm taking them from that
You
column,
went
and I'm
here?
moving them over to this hate
there.
column.
I get it. I get it. I love Bob Huggins, though.
It is amazing
It's a
how
weird
quickly the NFL has taken Isiah Wilson from the let's give him a second, third, fourth opportunity to the column of no return. And that is where the offensive tackle finds himself now. Now out of the league within 10 months of being drafted in the first round and out of his second NFL organization in 3 days after the Miami Dolphins acquired him in a trade where they were handed him Isiah Wilson just to get him out of Nashville and off the roster in exchange for seventh-round picks, where the Titans get the Dolphins' seventh round this year. The Dolphins will get the Titans' seventh-round pick next year for the 3-day swap of events there. Isiah Wilson for the amount of people, guys, that have clamored and jumped to his defense, saying, here's a player who just needs help, and stop ripping on him because he needs help. You can do both. Yes, he needs help. He can go get help and be out of the NFL. The fact that the Titans waited as long as they did to bolt him from the roster is insulting. And the fact that John Robinson drafted this guy, think about that.
In the first
round. Less
round.
than a year ago.
In the first round.
John
Shame.
Robinson drafted the guy.
Shame.
And now he's continually putting himself on video.
Vaping.
The most recent one, I think it was probably the
Shirtless.
same day, he's discussing those on social media, calling him lazy because it's in his Twitter handle, and and how that he has been working out since he was 14 years old. Have fun doing that at the local Y.
Doesn't look like it when his shirt's off.
Yeah, have fun doing that at the local Y because it's embarrassing what he's done.
Look, all he had to do, they didn't ask much of him. Show up on time for what? He was late for his physical. He was late for a meeting, and then he pledged to show up for a couple of workouts that they had set up for him. He didn't show up on those. Look, if you can't be on time in the NFL, you're doomed. They're not making special rules for a guy
the
in his
NFL
circumstance.
and most respectable businesses in America. But yes, continue.
Yeah, so just show up.
Showing up on time is a prereq for everything.
Right.
Yeah.
And certainly for your second chance after you were completely out from your first chance for botching everything, for doing drunken donuts on a major thoroughfare, for threatening to jump off a balcony rather than get caught smoking pot at a party going on during COVID where you weren't supposed to be at a Tennessee State University dorm, on and on. Wrecked his car a couple times. Probably
We still
more
don't
than
know
we
what he did. We still don't know what he did for the suspension after the Indianapolis Colts game where he played in 4 snaps.
Yeah. I think it was just a general accumulation of...
No, he did. Why did he play? Why did he play in that game then?
Why did he play?
Why did he play if they were going to suspend him after the game? Like something happened on that trip for him to be suspended the week after for 1 week.
Yeah, don't know. And then, the non-football illness. He definitely has mental problems that somebody needs to deal with. Nobody's able to get through to him. Here's the one last thing I could see happening with Isiah Wilson is he disappears now. Though he's not going to disappear because there's going to be this social media presence which he can't stop
You're right,
himself from being involved in. But if anybody wise ever gets to him, which is not going to happen in short order, he disappears like from the social media scene and everything. We don't hear anything of him or about him for 18 months or 2 years. And then somebody conceivably, if he's been gotten to, if he's on medication and comes to his senses, he quietly emerges as a training camp body for somebody and gets one real last chance where his agent convinces somebody that he now is regulated and ready to be a responsible citizen, where he's one of 90 players in camp, maybe the 90th player in camp, and somebody says, well, if this guy has it together, he has an NFL body if we can reshape him, and maybe he winds up on our practice squad. We beat him up for a year, and then if you could turn him into something, you'd be really potentially getting something. Is there any reason to hope for that at this stage? Absolutely not. But that's the only road I could see is he goes away now for a good share of time.
I'm getting really tired of media members disciplining fans for being disappointed in a first-round bust to the level of Isiah Wilson. Now, we just got done talking about E.J. Liddell and how you should not ever message a player and go after them and threaten them or say awful things to them in their messenger. But I'll say this too. Any Titans fan, Dolphins fan, NFL fan, hell, fan of sports or high-level business that's disappointed and wants to make fun of Isiah Wilson for blowing opportunities and doing things like this, I'm all for it. The guy deserves it. He is lazy. He may also have mental issues. He may also have substance abuse issues. I can't have sympathy, though, for someone who will not ever seek help or listen to advice from someone. That's where you lose me. I felt bad for Josh Hamilton when he went to rehab a couple times and then got photographed out hammered at a bar. Because he's clearly a guy who wants to do better, he wants treatment, he wants to be okay. I'm not going to sit here and throw a pity party for a guy who milked an organization for millions and made that kind of money and didn't even show up to work in 2 different places and got a second chance. I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry, because you have every right to be disappointed in that person. Do I hope that he figures it out one day and he actually contributes to society other than whatever the hell he's doing right now? Yes, I do. Is that happening anytime soon? Probably not. Why? Because he doesn't think he's got an issue. He thinks what he's doing is smart and everyone else is the idiot. I've got a problem with that, and it's okay for you too as well.
Agree.
And it's okay to question the organization that said, we want team first, accountable, trustworthy, tough,
Love
physical players who love football. And 10 months later, this is the result of the draft pick.
If love ball is your number one thing, the Titans really, not only did guys fail the love ball test, Isiah Wilson and Vic Beasley first among them, the Titans failed at administering the test, right? If that's your number one thing, that is not a hard thing to determine, I don't think. You guys think that's hard to determine? That should be very easy, looking at a guy's history to determine if he loves ball. And I don't know how you miss on Isiah Wilson loving ball and Vic Beasley loving ball. You could have called anybody in Atlanta to find out about Vic Beasley
more than a
loving
miss.
ball.
This is a setback.
And yeah, because you have a ripple effect of missing on a number one pick. You could have gone a lot of different directions there. You could have, I don't know, you maybe didn't get the trade out.
It affects what they have
you
to do
wanted.
now.
Absolutely. And right
Changes their whole
tackles
strategy.
got an issue. Look, they didn't turn out to be a great pass rusher there, but you can go best player available there and go a lot of different directions. Hell, if you take Christian Fulton at 29 last year, round 2 early, then you're doing something else in the second round that helps your roster. They're all different kind of permutations. But it has a ripple effect for at least 4 years, which, by the way, is all the Titans get out of their first-round picks. We had this conversation lately. They should be getting 5. They should be getting second contract. They should be getting 8, 9. It's awful. On this one, they get 0 years. Really.
Adoree Jackson, the most recent first-round pick, well, Corey Davis, same draft, who is no longer with the team. He's meeting with the Giants. He had dinner last night with friend of the show, Logan Ryan, in New York, New Jersey. So they could be teammates again there. He's also reportedly going to Philadelphia later this evening if the Giants allow that to happen. But it looks like NFC East for him. For the reporters who think in New York, if they land Adoree Jackson, it's a great thing. I don't disagree if they're just looking at the last time the guy played.
Right.
He barely played last year. But if you rewind a year, like we can do right now, in 2020 when they picked up, or 2019 when they picked up the 5th-year option for Adoree Jackson, all was well. It was a player who was improving in his physicality and the tone set on the outside. And was coming off a great year 3 and then didn't play in year 4.
Thing about Adoree Jackson, if you're banking on him to be your some kind of large solution, is he's not consistent week to week, right? So there'd be a week where he shut somebody down, and the next week T.Y. Hilton would light him up, and he would say, hey, I'm totally accountable to that. T.Y. Hilton got the best of me today. In the NFC East, in the New York or Philadelphia market, you have one of those T.Y. Hilton games, you are getting destroyed in the public. And how does Adoree Jackson handle that? He's never dealt with that to that degree. And the way he seemed, for the lack of a better word, soft upon his return this last year, where he had no answers and was talking in code and seemed very protected by the team. If there's any semblance of that left next year, any semblance of 2020 left, as opposed to a return to 2019, I think it could be a dangerous recipe. I'm very curious to see. It's certainly not worth a $10 million cap hit or a $10 million cash payment.
No.
And so I'm very curious to see what the contract is as well.
I'm curious if you guys get the same vibe. The Titans internally don't want to talk about injuries, period.
Period.
The vibe I got was they were frustrated by Adoree Jackson not playing sooner than he actually played. He returned in December, I believe it was, Paul.
Yeah.
Finally.
Detroit
the vibe
game,
I
3
received
games left.
was they took him off IR for a reason, and then 3 weeks later the guy still wasn't ready to play.
It took 5 weeks.
Yeah, it took a lot longer than expected.
Yeah,
And
I wrote that. There was internal debate. He's a track guy, and he's one of those guys that feels like I've got to feel entirely right before I
Yeah,
get
and that was
back.
my theory last season, Chad.
Yeah, and
about
they
the track
felt
guys.
like, and they felt like look, you don't have to feel 100% before you go. Guys are playing right now who don't feel 100%. Why do you have to feel 100%? There was friction on this issue, and as desperate as they were in the secondary, I'm with them, dude. If you're 80%.
Yep.
You know, we understand you've had pain with what I reported was patellar tendonitis, which can hurt like hell. But that was a long timetable for patellar tendonitis.
Well, so here's where we get back into the Titans culture and what they want. Team first, football guys. I can understand the mindset of, if I go out there at 80% and look awful and I'm getting touchdowns scored on me, my agent's going to come to me and say, it doesn't matter that you're 80%. Those stats and that film is going to show up when you reach free agency, and they're going to be quick to cut you, and you're going to have a hard time going somewhere else. So you better feel right, and you better be at your top game to go back in there. But the competitor in someone would say, my guys are out there struggling. They need me out there. Even if I'm 80%, I'm better than the backup option at 100%. So I can understand the Titans, if that's the case, wanting to move forward from a guy who protected self above team and said, I'm not going out there at 80% because I can see where an agent or even yourself would get in there and say, you know what, this team's not going to protect me. This organization's not going to protect me. If I go out there and suck and I'm giving up 80-yard touchdowns because I can't run the way that I want to run, and that's my game is predicated on me running full speed, then I can understand the team saying, well, we kind of want guys that aren't thinking about the way they're going to look in a game or their next contract. We want a guy that's out there when the doctors clear you and we're saying it's okay to play because it helps your team.
Well, he waited till he was close to 100%, and then the film sucked, and then he lost the $10 million contract. He's going to wind up making less money, maybe over the course of the contract, who knows, but certainly in the short term. So he hurt himself on all levels.
Josh Reynolds, the newest Tennessee Titan. We discussed the wide receiver acquisition coming up on the Tennessee Power Hour here on OutKick 360. The Titans signed veteran wide receiver Josh Reynolds. Welcome back, OutKick 360 across the OutKick OTT network. Fox Sports Knoxville as well this evening, alongside Chad Withrow and Paul Koharski. I'm Jonathan Hutton. Glad you're with us, and glad you're with us across all of the different platforms, including YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and more. So, the Titans go out. They have signed Reynolds, 6'3", roughly 200 pounds. Tall, lanky receiver, possession-type receiver, a guy who could go up in traffic and make a contested catch. Coming off of a career year as a solid number 3 option in L.A. Can he be a number 2 option for Ryan Tannehill, Paul?
I think it's hopeful. Can he be? Maybe. Can you count on him being right now? Absolutely not. He doesn't bring the speed element that I'm looking for, though he's good at separating. He knows how to get open in a way that doesn't necessarily involve him running away from people. So I'm encouraged by that. Look, the Titans are desperate for 2 wide receivers. It would be very hard for them to draft 2 wide receivers who could both be top 3 wide receivers on opening day. Josh Reynolds can be a top 3 wide receiver on opening day. Cam Batson's now your 4th. All right, so now you're going to be 4 deep. The number 2 receiver on this team is going to be a high draft pick, I presume. So I like him in that regard. Is he Corey Davis? I think absolutely not right now. You know, if they develop him and find the right ways to use him, what's his ceiling? His ceiling would be, you know, a number 2.
Well, that could be his ceiling.
I think he's probably
It's also Corey Davis'
number
ceiling.
3. Here's the other thing that I think. I think that the Titans are probably, my sense is, less concerned with having a designated slot guy, right? I think Josh Reynolds can play in the slot and outside. I think A.J. Brown could play in the slot and outside. I think the guy they draft may, you know, it's fine if he's a designated outside guy in base. That's fine. If he can play inside, that'd be great. Then you have 3 guys who can all play inside, and you can mix and match based on the game and the matchups and all of that thing. The day of having Adam Humphries, who's purely a slot guy, may be over, and that's probably a good thing, versatility-wise. You could also line up Ferkser in the slot some now, who's going to have, I think, an extended tight end role. And so you've got some more diversity and versatility. I like Josh Reynolds, but I think people who are saying the Titans have found Corey Davis's replacement are being way too hopeful. And it's funny to me how with some free agents, like everybody wants Josh Reynolds to be great, and with some of these other signings, like the Janoris Jenkins, oh my God, that guy's nowhere near good enough to be a top cornerback. Well, what are the levers here?
Well, so Josh Reynolds versus Corey Davis, if you're comparing the two. There's no comparison statistically. Josh Reynolds' best year was his last year, a little over 600 yards. Corey Davis had over 800 yards. He's had better seasons. He was also the 5th overall pick that was given better opportunity.
And Josh Reynolds was on a team with better wide receiver depth.
Josh Reynolds was a 4th-round draft pick out of Texas A&M, not given the same opportunity as Corey Davis. So if you want to compare the two, you have to compare it with these are the opportunities now that Josh Reynolds will receive. And you could argue, we believe, given the Corey Davis level of opportunity, he can be a similar player. But on face value, statistically, given their career so far, not the same player. Corey Davis is superior. I also don't think Corey Davis is a number 1 receiver.
No.
So Josh Reynolds could be a very good number 2 receiver. This could be the Titans saying that. Corey Davis, we know, is a good number 2 receiver, probably not a number 1 receiver. So it all depends on how you look at Josh Reynolds now, given those Corey Davis opportunities.
Before this signing, they're absolutely desperate. They have to have 2 wide receivers. After this signing, you can relax a little bit.
Yeah.
So they need to draft a very good wide receiver. But with Reynolds and Batson behind A.J. Brown, you have the substance of a reasonably, you're not dead at wide receiver.
They have reduced the
urgency.
but the urgency's still there, just like it's still a corner, right? Or the defensive back.
But they've
in general.
reduced the urgency with Jenkins
and
and Johnson.
Let's look at it from the player perspective now, because reportedly, and he's coming from an offense where Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods led the team in receiving They had a good tight end game as well in L.A. And then there's Josh Reynolds. Reportedly, the Kansas City Chiefs were also interested in Reynolds.
Which is a good sign.
And you have Reynolds, it's a reported one-year deal. I haven't seen the money and the compensation yet, but if it's a one-year deal, especially with the team like the Titans, who doesn't have a ton of cap room, I would imagine that the offers were similar in nature, right? What's the appeal to try to do a one-and-done or cash in after a one-year contract here versus in Kansas City?
Well, there's more opportunity here. You would think. Now, you also don't know who the draft pick is, right? So there's a little more uncertainty here right now than there is in Kansas City. And they're selling you probably on that to a good degree. Here's another thing we don't know. Maybe you have a better sense of it than I do. What kind of blocker is Josh Reynolds? Because and I'm not big. You guys know this on wide receivers. Number one trait being a blocker. Though we heard a lot about that of Corey Davis during his first 3 years, where he wasn't nearly as good of a wide receiver as he needed to be. He blossomed in his fourth year. But the Titans need their wide receivers to block. That's part of the Derrick Henry thing, and for each other. I don't get the sense looking at him and knowing what I know of his game that would be a forte. Now, you can teach that, but you also have to have some of that in you. You have a sense for that?
I don't.
We'll
Although
have to ask around on that a little bit.
my guess is that's one of the reasons
Adequate.
they're bringing him in, honestly.
At least adequate.
Yeah, because if you look at a lot of the Derrick Henry highlights, Corey Davis is
He was terrific.
walking downfield.
He was terrific at it. And
On the
A.J.
big
Brown's
runs.
terrific at it. They're both terrific at it.
They both have that hard-nosed attack to
And
it.
the physique for it. Josh Reynolds is lankier, less. He doesn't have. He's not thick like Corey Davis and A.J. Brown.
He's built more like a Justin Hunter type.
Yes. Which is a type they went away from, but he doesn't
Typically
have
not a type
Justin
you would
Hunter's
think is a
speed.
great blocker, but doesn't mean he's not an adequate blocker.
That's right. So they address wide receiver. We know that they have re-signed over the weekend Tyson Brilo. They've made that official, Paul. So
They're three deep at
they've
at
added
tackle.
they've added to their offensive line. Still think they have to go and address defensive line. They have to. They're looking at a safety and another corner, another wide receiver for sure. Not necessarily
Another
ranking
pass
needs
rusher.
right now, but the retooling is far from over.
Far from complete. Safety, I get what you're saying, but they've been pretty much three deep at safety for the last few years, and they've been okay with that. So if Cruikshank is back, and I presume he's
Yeah, but
healthy.
he spends half his time on IR.
Yeah. But they could conceivably be three deep with Byard, Hooker, and Cruikshank. And they can always draft, they're always going to draft a DB that's kind of cornerish, safety-ish. So
Yeah.
that he could be a hybrid, kind of a guy like Hooker who could play in a way that's a hybrid DB kind of guy. We'll see. They're definitely drafting. I think we would agree. In the top three picks, there's got to be a corner. There's got to be a wide receiver. Third one to me is up for grabs. I would be okay if the young pass rusher wasn't necessarily that high. If they go out still and get another veteran pass rusher, be it an older guy like Kerrigan or the guy from the Rams whose name I'm forgetting now, who I know they liked in the past, a young guy who had 7 sacks and 15 pressures over the last 2 years, who I think they liked coming out of college, whose name is not on the tip.
Well, now you face the dilemma: do you go out and get that player, or does that player now wait on the market after the draft?
Post-draft or post-June 1st, too, there'll be some
Exactly.
movement.
Yeah, that's the next date to watch. Guys, the NCAA tournament continues. I for one, am thrilled that we have NCAA tournament action on a Monday evening this year. I know it felt a little weird on Thursday not having games last week, but now we get to go home and watch all these games in prime time again on a weeknight.
Yeah, first Monday night NCAA men's tournament action. That's not the national championship
And then we're
game
waiting.
in a while.
Then we wait till Saturday, right?
Yes.
For the next tip-offs.
Now the next cycle for Sweet 16 Elite 8, Saturday and Sunday, 4 games each day in the Sweet 16. Monday, Tuesday, Elite 8 games, 2 each night.
Yeah, that'll be a little bit weird, but hey, Tell me when it's on. I'll be there.
Same.
And we've got the first game happening right now, and it's a blowout. Oregon all over Iowa. So
Oregon
the
well
day's
rested.
starting out with a blowout as of right now.
Well rested, but consider what they've done, which is practically nothing.
Consider
In that
what.
city.
Consider
And
what
Iowa was a huge pick.
look at the
Yeah.
Pac-12. By
Yeah.
the way, Oregon's up 82-64 with 8 minutes left. 18 on number 2 seed Iowa. So a 7 seed. Looks like they're headed to the Sweet 16. But
I put money down on Iowa to win the region.
Oregon State,
Futures.
UCLA, USC, Colorado, all still dancing right now.
Another reason for me to do no betting. Certainly
know
not
what?
betting on somebody to win a region. It's
My
a
bracket.
dumb bet in this bracket.
Just
Did you have Iowa?
I mean,
It's
look,
gone.
everyone can tear their bracket up, right?
gone.
We're hearing all the time about everybody's bracket being, everybody's bracket's busted. There's no one, if they're telling you their bracket looks good, they're lying.
My
It's
kid-
all different degrees of awful. That's what brackets look
My
like
kid
right now.
picked UT to win the whole thing, so that was a fiasco. But he had North Texas. He had Oral Roberts when a kid's just messing around.
Yep.
He was hitting all of these crazy things, except that his champion was gone in the half first day.
Guys, fun show today. Great to be back for week number 2. Huge thank you to Lance Lee, to Jakob Swanson, the Bath Salt Bandit, David Reed, the chairman of the board, Cody Stutes, making all the podcasts happen for us across the OTT network. Let's do it again tomorrow. We'll recap all the games this evening. Back here tomorrow at 11 a.m. Central, noon Eastern.
Day 7 tomorrow.
I
Day
think that
7
could
of
be
the show.
arranged. I think that could be arranged.
Hit us up on social media in the meantime at OutKick 360. Like and subscribe to our podcast. Big thank you for a thumbs up on YouTube if you're watching there as well. Catch us tomorrow, OutKick 360 at OutKick.com.
Can you see that sign down there? You know what it says? Don't block the box.